Hi, it's Tina and Tim again, and today's presentation is on courtroom etiquette, both in person and virtually. So we can't take 100% credit for this. As a local judge of ours, Judge McCarthy, came up with these little tidbits of how he would like people and the courtroom personnel, including attorneys, to behave when coming before his court. But we provided this to him and he doesn't remember doing it, but it was so great. We had to create a presentation based upon his words. So here we go with courtroom etiquette. Number one of courtroom etiquette, according to Judge McCarthy, would be, go ahead, Tim.
Not being disruptive. So disruptive behavior, talking, laughing, shouting, not okay. You don't shout out of turn. You don't talk while the judge is talking. If you hear something that someone testifies to, you don't chuckle, roll your eyes, things like that. You're being professional. You have to have some level of decorum while you're in the courtroom.
Okay, and the other thing is, remember, everything that can be heard is being recorded, whether it's a court reporter or by Teams or Skype or whatever type of electronic recording system the court has set up. So be careful, like Tim said, decorum. So next, if you have a cell phone, whether you're appearing electronically in person, turn it off. Or if you're allowed to, right? If you're allowed to, if you're allowed to bring it in, put it on silent mode. What's worse when everybody's concentrating on what they're trying to get to the court, through to the court's, attention or brought to the court's attention, is a ringtone going off or a loud buzzing because you're getting 1,000 text messages. Silencio, silence. Okay.
Yes.
So here's something that should not even be part of this because it should be self-explanatory. Keep the ninja knives at home and whatever else you might have, or they're going to take it. You might get arrested.
Correct. Be on time. That's always a good one. Now listen, everybody argues, why do I need to be on time if the court's just going to run late? It's the court. You don't have the authority to question the court's timeline. Be there, be ready. The court is not going to be happy if you're 25 minutes late rolling in and saying, oh, well, sorry, not going to look good for you.
Right, and the same goes for attorneys. Attorneys do try to be on time at court, but remember, courtroom attorneys, they have other appearances, and one appearance running late will then result in that individual attorney running late for every subsequent appearance. So usually attorneys inform the court that they're running late, and they should be able to text you and inform you as the litigant / client, look, running late, was in a prior court appearance. Can you let the courtroom attendant know, or the bailiff, or whoever's in charge of keeping record of who's present for that court appearance?
And
so
you can do the same. If you're running late, let's say you are not, represented, call the court and tell them you're running late. It's just being polite. Go ahead.
Here, and I'm saying, and if you're running late and you forgot to spit out your gum because you were chewing it, or your tobacco, here's your opportunity on your way in, throw it out, because that is very, very rude, distracting, and disgusting. Right.
And most of this is common sense when you're in person, but thanks to COVID, and our now virtual appearances, you feel comfortable in your own home. Most of the time, that's where you're going to be, going to court, right, or on the phone. Even though you're not physically in the courtroom, you are in the courtroom. So don't be sitting in your kitchen, smoking a cigarette, drinking your cup of coffee like you're watching your soap opera on TV. You are still in court, okay? So it still applies.
Or if you actually are thirsty and you do have your cup of Joe or whatever you're drinking, ask the court if they don't mind whether or not you take a drink. That's what's appropriate.
We're virtual. I have my cup of coffee, which you can see right there, but keep it off to the side. You don't want to put it right up in front of your face.
All right. Now here is the biggie. When either Tim and I go to court, I can't help but it's not a fashion show. Let me just skip to that. It's not a fashion show and it's not a slumber party. A lot of people think it's appropriate to show up in their pajama pants and their workout clothes, the tube top, or really offensive t-shirts. Not everybody needs to know what you think of somebody's body parts or your hatred for whatever, or your liking to smoke 1,000 pounds of weed or whatever your thing is. Just come to court like you would have gone to court back in the 50s. You know what? Dress in a suit. Do the opposite of what is actually happening. It'll
I
go a
always
long
say,
way.
dress professionally, dress to impress. The courtroom is not your place to make a political statement. You're not going to Walmart to go shopping. You're not going to have coffee with Aunt Susan. You are there as an interview, just like you would for a job. You are there to impress this judge. You want to be taken seriously. And walking up in that courtroom in a pair of Cookie Monster pajama pants, I really don't think anybody's going to take you too seriously.
And then, of course, it's distracting. Do you want the court to focus on what you have to say or look down at your raunchy shirt? Or, you know, women now think it's appropriate. Well, I'm going to wear the most plunging neckline, so I'm basically falling out, or a super short mini skirt. Really, it's not appropriate. And like Tim said, you want to show one, respect to the court, and two, you want to have the court take you seriously. So be serious and take your proceedings seriously. So here's something that cannot be avoided. If you have small children and you don't have childcare for whatever reason, certain courtrooms, or certain courthouses, I should say, have childcare for parties participating in litigation at their courthouse. So when you check in, ask if they have that, if you have your child with you. And if not, hopefully your child is not cranky, irritable, and is a screamer, because you know what? That too is very distracting. And it also shows the court that you're not taking the proceeding seriously, because why didn't you make arrangements to have somebody watch your child so you could handle what was going on in court? You know, having your baby there isn't a means, oh, look, the court's going to like me better when the judge sees me interact with my child. No, he's taking that as you're not being a responsible parent doing the responsible thing by taking care of your obligations to make sure the child is, as we said in our previous thing, the Children's Bill of Rights, not part of the litigation. So you might think of those things, you know, when you try to bring your little infant the next time to court.
And we're not putting anybody down. It does happen. Sometimes you can't avoid it. Make sure you let the courts be aware that you couldn't avoid it. The child's there. Try to make accommodations the best you can, however.
Right.
This so much.
Well, let me stop. And sometimes you'll see attorneys do it too. Everybody has an emergency and they might be bringing their child, but you know what? Attorneys that bring their kids to court, they have other attorneys that could step in and say, you know what, watch Johnny while I go and do my 20-minute court appearance. You know, there's always other people that would help another attorney in that situation. So here's one that now we're in the courtroom, and here's how you actually need to behave in person. Okay, so Tim, go ahead.
I was going to say, this doesn't happen so much in a virtual appearance, and people have kind of somewhat gotten lax, but anytime that you are addressing the court or speaking with the court, unless the judge says to you, be seated, you know, you're fine, stand up, show the court the respect that it deserves, even if you don't feel like it deserves it. And let's face it, we deal with a lot of litigants who have very strong opinions as to the court being awful. They're still the court. So you're going to stand when you address the court, and you're going to address the judge. You're going to say your honor or the court. That's how you address them. So always stand. If you can't, let's say you have a disability or something that prohibits your ability to do that, let the court know. Your Honor, I'm very, very sorry that I can't stand right now. I have a brace on my leg or my back is bad. Explain that. You're perfectly fine to do that. But otherwise, you should be standing and showing the court the respect it deserves.
And remember, it's not only stand when addressing the court, you need to remain standing when you come into the courtroom until you're told to be seated. And when the judge leaves the bench, you also stand up. That's another way you're showing respect to the court. And here more, our next thing is more respect. So just remember, okay? I mean, that's a little, the little video here is a little extreme of her crying and thank you. That's kind of melodramatic. The court doesn't really need that, okay?
No.
Court just needs
The
respect.
respect. And just remember, if you don't know a person's name, here's a little tidbit, refer to them as ma'am or sir.
Okay, and definitely do not call the opposing attorney on your matter by their first name.
No.
It's so inappropriate, and it happens to me all the time when the other side looks at me and says, Tina this or Tina that, or
If you don't know their name, counsel.
right? And always, like he said, counsel, judge, your honor. So just be very respectful. Don't treat people as you would not want to be treated, right? The golden rule.
Exactly.
So here's our next to last video. So here we go again. Do it, Tim. Explain a little.
Well, like she said, avoid the first name basis, but the bickering, you have to maintain that formality at the bare minimum. You're going to have some bickering. For the most part, if you're represented and not representing yourself, you really should just sit there quietly and allow your attorney to make the appropriate objections and proceedings as it goes. If you're representing yourself, allow for the other side to finish their thought unless it's something in object. Make the objection. Try not to get engaged in some type of power struggle. It just looks bad. Never, ever interrupt if it can be avoided. That's the quickest way you're going to make a judge very angry, not to mention it gets very confusing for the court reporter who's taking down all the information, and that might not work in your favor. You may miss something very important that needed to be transcribed into that recording.
Right, and it's very important to maintain the record. So back to what Tim just said, attorneys do, bicker is a nice description, but when attorneys are starting to posture their position, they can get loud, they can appear angry, they can then themselves attempt to demean the other counsel. That's not appropriate behavior between professionals either. So all the rules we're talking today apply to everyone appearing before the court. So attorneys shouldn't interrupt attorneys. Attorneys shouldn't interrupt judges. You'll hear all of this. And then you're just going to start to gauge like, wow, I'm so glad my attorney was sitting there quiet because I didn't realize the judge would get so angry because the judge couldn't get in a word edgewise about what was going on. So just keep some of these things in mind. So our last slide about courtroom etiquette also applies to virtual, and just like we were saying, it applies virtually. So here's some extra tips and Tim will take us through them.
So make sure you're in a quiet location if you're at home. Make sure you're somewhere where, listen, dogs bark, things happen, but you want it to be quiet, no distractions. Make sure you have the appropriate equipment downloaded on your computer or your device, whether it's via Zoom or Teams. Make sure that it's operating in that area that you've selected. Make sure that it's appropriately working. Make sure you're facing the computer like we are. In this case, finding out where your focal point is so that you're looking actually at the judge and you're not looking side to side or down or wherever. So you want to try to maintain that eye contact. Let's see, make sure you dress appropriately, even though you're virtual. And like I said, you may feel comfortable in your home, you're still addressing the court. Wear a nice shirt. Listen, you want to wear your sweatpants, go ahead. I guess you're fine because they're only going to see you from the waist up. Don't have your
brush your,
cigarette. Yeah.
oh
brush
yeah,
your
the cigarette.
teeth. Don't have your cigarettes sitting out. Don't be drinking your coffee.
Brush
Make
your
sure
hair,
make
right?
sure your mic is, yeah, and make sure your mic is muted as well. That way you don't get the distracting sound. And you know, it'll happen. And the judge will work with you. There are differences now that we're doing things electronically. The other thing is, please, 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 because we're in an age of technology, don't be on your appearance driving yourself to Tim Hortons and ordering Burger King and going about your daily functions. You are supposed to be present in court.
So if you are driving, here is a tip: pull over and do the appearance, and hopefully you have good Wi-Fi if you happen to be driving. But another important thing, back to the mic working or being muted. Look, if you don't mute that mic and you start talking about your case, everybody can hear it. And if you say something not particularly appropriate, it will put you in a negative light because people are going to remember what you said while you were unmuted when you should have been muted. And lastly, you cannot have your children in the same room while you are doing a virtual appearance. The court will ask you, but even if the court doesn't ask you, just know that's not appropriate. And remember, read the Children's Bill of Rights if you don't know how bad that is to involve your child within the litigation process itself. So finally, we're going to say goodbye, and we want you to go back onto our YouTube page and want you to subscribe today. We want you to like our video, and we love comments and questions. So don't forget, and we'll see you next time. It's Tina and Tim, and enjoy.